Ah, rain, rain, do not go away. It is such a beautiful day because it's rainy and nasty, and I can't ride this trike for nothing. Well, I could. I have rain gear, and it doesn't scare me. But we are just enjoying the fact that we had 2 inches of soaking rain today, and this will make a huge difference in my garden. We're at that critical time right after germination where the moisture needs to be really high in the soil. And honestly, after watching all the events that are going on in Lake Mead and Las Vegas, which the Colorado River is part of, I'm been a little shocked at the conditions out there. I'm a past Vegas resident. I'm concerned about it. It worries me, and I'm very sorry that people are having to endure those conditions. I can't even imagine, and I thought we were dry 20 years ago, but I just don't even know what to think about Lake Mead and the Hoover Dam actually not being able to generate power at some point in time within days. At any rate, I'm here because of a subject that I touched on with battery tenders a few weeks ago. Wanted to touch back because I mentioned that it is my firm belief that I drive a vehicle that is gasoline powered, that has a modern battery system and a modern starter. I don't have a Kickstarter. It comes with all the electronics in it, the advanced computers for precision control, tuning, ABS functionality, safety, the VSS, the Ride Nanny, all this other stuff. This is a very, very advanced machine. And because of it, it also uses a system that's unique. But my point on that little spot of lecture is, if you go out and spend $20,000 to $40,000 for a 3-wheel vehicle with a battery and a high-performance motor, it should be reasonable to expect that the vehicle should start during summer hours in normal conditions without having to hook it to a box. These are gasoline-powered motors. These are motors that do not need to be plugged into a wall. We are not EVs, we are gas. And this vehicle during summer hours, even if it's just 40 degrees Fahrenheit or 2 or 3 degrees Celsius, it should still reasonably start in the morning and not only run, but run all day. Now this is critically important, and what I'm discussing today is I mentioned 2 things in dealing with a subject where somebody said they leave their battery tender plugged in all the time. You shouldn't need to. It's my contention and argument that battery tenders are assistants that you use in storage, in winter months, or when you are riding in winter months. Either way, batteries of a small size, like that guy up there, are usually a little weaker. Up there you're seeing a unique battery that's actually a 450 cold cranking amp battery that can be mounted in this bike. It matches the size that you need for your battery compartment on the RSS. Unfortunately, I think 450 cold cranking amps, learned the hard way, is too much for the 2012 charging system. Now the 2013s can probably handle it. They have a higher standard of operation, a stronger charging system. They put out a lot more wattage than the 2012s and priors, and they're a lot more reliable with their more advanced charging system. But getting back to this, there are 2 things that you should be able to test, because this is my contention. I have paid $20,000 for a gas-powered, battery-operated vehicle. Well, not battery-operated, but battery-assisted in the fact that it starts my vehicle. I should have lights, I should have functionality, so on and so forth. I should be able to get it to turn over. I should not have to leave this item plugged in for long distances of time. Now, why is that? Because your system is designed with its recharge system and regeneration system, and the battery itself are designed to work in coordination with the electronic systems and so on and so forth to make sure that you're maintaining a charge in this battery at all times while the vehicle is running. So if you are at a point where you're not able to start the vehicle, you have to leave it plugged into a battery tender, or you're doing that past 4 years. That's my magic number, and I'll stick to that number from experience. And you're using a battery tender to get 7-8 years of life out of a battery, you're actually harming the battery. Your vehicle should start your vehicle at reasonable hours. Going back to that again, or reasonable temperatures and reasonable times and reasonable functionality. You also need a healthy battery, because when you're out riding like we were on Solstice, we hit 96 degree temperatures, And you need to make sure that your charging system is going to be available for you and functioning, and it can send the voltage to someplace that's storing it. And batteries in hot weather, just like in cold, are not good at storing electricity unless you keep them fresh, in shape. I get that you're seeing a battery tender might do that, but the biggest thing with an AGM battery is its lifespan. Is it under 4 years old, and are you using it properly? Now, I mentioned two things in that video, and the first of which is you need to know how to test your battery, because again, your vehicle should be able to start on its own, and if it's not, in summer months, you've got one of two problems. You've got a bad battery, or you've got a bad charging system. This video, and sorry for the long intro, is actually going to be quite short, because I'm going to show you how to check your battery, make sure you're at the proper voltage, and make sure you're ready for the road, and some characteristics to watch out for, and another general maintenance recommendation, especially on the older variant RSSs and RGs pre-2012. So bear with me for a minute, and I'll get out our famous meter that I always like to bring out and show around and say, you must have this. Now you're going to learn why. So you're going to learn why you do not need to leave your vehicle on a battery tender running up your electric bill. Thanks for watching so far, and I'll be back in just one moment. Peace. Told you I wouldn't leave you hanging. I'm back. So, as I've advised, I've gone through the favor of, I'm just going to lift my seat. And I would go through the pain of exposing my battery leads and so on and so forth, but not going to lie to you. Even though the Can-Am gives you a lot of space to work in and all that, I just prefer not to take any panels off if I don't have to. I've done enough work inside here where you can see I'm just going to give you a brief look at what we're looking at. You can see that I've installed not only the ultimate seat, but I have that little trunk cover, so I had to install that. Then, of course, when I've done my various battery replacements over the last 3 years, so on and so forth, I actually put in, yes, I have a battery tender slave, or one of these cable attendants that you use to slave your battery tenders. And I've been playing with it, so bear with me, I've got the cap off it. And I also brought with this time my, this is a Gardner Bender brand digital multimeter, and this is what I use to keep track of what's going on this bike. Now, we're going to test the battery right now, and this is actually relatively quick. You notice that I have this set to off, but I'm going to go over to voltage. I'm going to go to the 20 volt range because I can test anything up to 20 volts from there, or the 12 volt socket. So we're going to go back to volts, come down to DC, and we're looking here at the 12 volt setting, I believe that is. I'm having a hard time reading it because it's quite dirty. There it is. Okay, so we're at the 12 volt setting. This is the range that you want to be able to test with your vehicle. Now you want to test the battery in two states. You want to test it stable or sitting, or what you call on the battery in its idling state, where it is not running, where there's no charges going through the battery. And forgive them if I'm confusing you with idling the vehicle. I don't mean to. I'm just saying that the battery is idle, and we don't need to worry about, you know, there's no activity on the system. Ignition's off, no power running through, so on and so forth. You need a good point to test with. Now, the advantage for me for installing a battery tender, other than a battery tender itself, other than that, is to be able to conduct testing without having to do a great deal of testing. Now, DC is DC, it runs one way. So you can't confuse how the meters lead. So if you're not getting a reading with the leads going one way, just switch them. In other words, I'm going to put two leads into these two holes, and I'm going to check the value that comes up on my meter. 1 second. I'm not idling, my battery is sitting still, and I do not keep it on a battery charger. I am correct, because I know that the one that's hidden, and typically this is true of any of your battery tender type connectors. When you connect them up, you want to make sure that your positive post is connected to this post, the one that's submitted. That way it can bounce around and it doesn't cause sparks if the cap isn't on it. Anyway, so when I go back into this lead, I can see that I've got right at 12.95 volts. There. Now, again, when your battery is sitting, you want 13 volts in that range. If you're at 12.5 at this range, you probably don't have much to worry about. As long as, now if you're down around 12.2 or 12.1, the voltage that you receive on this, because testing for amperage is quite difficult on a multimeter unless you have a fluke, and they're so complicated I don't even want to go there. But when you're seeing that I have 13 volts, you can assume that this battery in this Trike is very close to the cold cranking amperage rating that it needs. And honestly, it should be no higher than 13.5 to 13.9 volts. I've seen some very strong batteries out there. My little friend that sits in the off duty, that's fried my charging system out there, he actually sits idle at about 13.3. So I like 12.9 just fine, 12.95. It's actually 13 volts with the budge factor. You'll notice when I go to start the bike now, it's going to be slightly different than that. But sitting idle, connected to the battery, and that's my positive and negative terminal going through my battery tender lead, I'm sitting right at 13 volts. That's perfect. If you're at 12 volts, you're not going to start on this bike. I think it has a threshold limit in the ECU of 12.5. So that's when you start to see problems with needing to hook up a tender or a charger and getting those amps up, because your amps come up with the volts. So your volts always are directly proportionate in a mathematical formula to the amount of amps coming out of the battery. So if you're seeing 12, 11, 10 volts, you're not going to start. 12.5 or above should start it. It'll be slow, and if you're doing that, if you're seeing that at idle, your battery is slightly aging, and it may be time to consider replacing it. Again, you'll see this mark at the 4-year mark. And this is the part that I disagree with the one gentleman about moving a bike with 7 to 8 years of battery use on it. I'll go on to the next section now, where we're going to test the voltage here at when it's idling, because that's the other important part. That's going to tell you how well your charging system is working. And note, you are now at 12.95 or 13 volts, because the other feature that I put on my bike that saves me a great deal of time, but I always check my resting battery directly off the leads. But I did install, because I've had electrical issues in the past and I needed to replace the stator, and I needed to replace the starter, and I needed to replace a regulator, rectifier, because somebody jump started the bike with a car and started the car. Never, ever, ever do that. So now I have Johnny voltmeter here, who gives me his readings between the two USB ports, and I also have two quick charge 3 amp little ports that I can use for my filming and so on and so forth. Doesn't really keep up to charging the GoPro, but it'll keep you running for about 10 hours. Just some advice on that. Anyway, that's what we have so far, and I'll talk to you in the next section, where we're going to be discussing how to test your system when it's idling, and the numbers you should expect from your system. By the way, these numbers apply to all motorcycles, not just your Can-Ams. This is your Cowies, this is your Harleys, this is everything else. These are the volt ranges you want off your batteries, and this is just advice on what to do. But again, if you were sitting at 13 volts, I'm at 70 degrees right now, but yesterday it was 95. It was still the same. I already checked. It should kick this system off quite readily. If it were 20 degrees out right now and this bike had been sitting overnight, I would likely have the battery tender connected. I'll be back in just a minute, and we'll start on the testing procedure for when the system's running. Thank you. Peace. Absolutely gorgeous day out. I just am in love with the fact that the weather's so nice today. It's so nice to sit out in my shop in 65 degree weather and not sweat to death. And it's June 23rd, so I'm really having a great day. Back to the task at hand. I traded places with my multimeter so I can give you a demonstration. We're going to do the testing and show you the range of voltages and how to do some troubleshooting on your electrical system while it's running. Again, note, do not have a battery tender attached. It's not necessary. I did just bend up my shop chair, so that's the cheap one. So I'm still sitting here, and this is going to be the test port that I'm going to be using for this little test. Let me just come kneel on my knees. Yeah, Craig's back on the ground. I know what you're thinking. Anyway, let's give it a start, and let's see what goes on. And we're going to take a reading with our trusty Gardner bender, and we'll go from there. So I did want to take a quick second, because I wanted to show something you and we'll speak on this. Now remember the voltage readings that I was getting off the voltmeter? I'm not getting one right now. Why? The relay is not in place. Remember, this is a CAN bus system that needs the master relay in place for this to work, so on and so forth. And those conditions just aren't working right now. But I'm going to keep this up right now because I want you to see what happens with the voltmeter when it appears. So don't trust what happens on that guy until you see what it's doing in actual action. You see how it jumped down to 12.2 and even 11.9 and it's working its way up? Don't trust that meter. Right now it's also calibrating to do its charging and off of these ports. The main priority of this thing is actually to provide power to these 3 USB ports, and this meter is there as a secondary basis. Now the meter also runs at runs a bit of voltage, so this really isn't true. Now my meter, we'll see. It's cool out, so I might be shocked, but typically my voltmeter typically shows up 1 to 2 tenths below what I read directly off the battery leads. But let's get back to the topic at hand. Now that I've started the bike and you've seen where my voltage was at battery idle or sitting still with nothing running at 13 volts. Now we've started, we're running at 14 to 14.1 and you'll see it flicker up to 14.2 every now and then. And as the motor spins up, it may jump a tenth, but it quickly puts it back in control, and you saw it drop to 13.9. Let's do that again. That is the regulator regulating the system. So it takes a moment for it to catch up with itself, but that's basically what you're facing and what you should be looking at. You should be getting anywhere from 14 to 14.5 volts, 13 and a half and up is a good general number, but at 14 to 14.5 volts, you are golden, absolutely golden. If you're at 13.7, you probably have a battery that's starting to age, and if it stays there and behaves and keeps you starting. If you start dropping during operation to 13.6, 13.5, then you're going to start having a problem. This CAN bus system is designed to monitor its voltage on its own in the ECU, so when it hits 13 to 13.4 volts, you might lose power. I did at mine at 13.4 several times. So we're going to go back and measure the voltage now as it's coming off the lead, and you should see it come up on that gauge. 1 second. And note we were running at 14 to 14.1 up there off the meter. And here we're getting 14.3. Charging system is actually idling quite well at this level, and this is exactly the number you want to see off your meter. Now you see why you need a good measuring point to measure this and make sure everything is okay. So your operational voltages are around 13 volts to 13.5 volts sitting with nothing running. The charging system's running, you should definitely see about 13.5 volts, but ideally you want to see it in the 14s. Ideally 14.5. You're seeing 14.6 to 15, you have the other problem. Your stator is likely starting to ground out and you're entering an area that's called overcharge. This can burn out your regulator, and this can burn out your RR, and your regulator. It can also burn out your stator. It's obviously failing. But you won't typically see 15 to 16 volts unless you're getting a grounded RR or a grounded stator. And honestly, when that happens, you usually see negative voltage. Now, more on being able to test your stator will be coming up in the next movie. I'm going to take some time and remove a panel because I need to get to the side of the motor I want you guys to see, and then we'll take it from there. But that is the battery. That is your battery while you're sitting with nothing running, and where your battery is idle, that's the voltage you should see. And then that's the voltage you should see when you are also running an operation. So thanks for watching. The next video will be about what to do with your stator and how to test your stator to make sure you are going to be functionally working. And these again are universal steps that I'll demonstrate using this guy right here, and we'll give you a little bit of an education. on how the charging system works as well. Thanks again for watching, and please feel free to subscribe to Trikes, Travel, and the Tag About You. I forgive you for the loud truck. Peace.